This is gonna be a very scary thumbnail. This is gonna be a very scary thumbnail. Oh, this is heavier than I imagined.
NANI?!
I hate myself. I hate myself. Are we good? Are we good still? Oh my god. No! Can you see that? Can you see that? Oh my god. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. That thumbnail was not worth breaking my Electro Turquoise. I'm just gonna say that. I'm just gonna say that. Hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sky, and if you are new here, here are a couple of random facts about me. Yes, my real name is actually Sky. I've had a lot of people ask me that throughout the years, but no, that is my real name. And I also love changing up my style with wigs, hair colours, all of that, hence why I am wearing my most new wig to my collection. That was an incorrect sentence, but I'm gonna roll with it. Today we're going to be ranking all of my eyeshadow palettes. Now, I asked y'all on my Instagram if you wanted to see this video despite having seen all of my palettes in my makeup collection videos, and y'all seem to really want to see it, so I had to rank everything for ya. Quick disclaimer, I do love all of these palettes, so even the ones that are in the bottom, they're palettes I still do like. I just base my ranking on formula, colour stories, that type of thing. A lot of this is just preference based. I'm not saying that any of these palettes are bad necessarily, but there are some clear winners here, and I think this is gonna surprise some of y'all. I think, actually, now that I'm looking at my top 5, I don't think it's surprising in the slightest. But anyways, let's get into the palettes. I'm also not including single shadow palettes because I feel like that's kind of cheating. That's kind of cheating. I have 17 palettes here, and I'm not going to be listing the numbers before each palette because we know that I am shit with numbers, so I'll just be putting them on screen right here. I do apologize, my editing self. Anyways, without further ado, let's get started. I'm actually really sad that this palette is at the bottom, is the lowest ranked out of all of these because I was so excited for this one. I waited for a long time, but I have to be honest with myself, and it's the Lunar Skies Cosmetics Anime Dreams palette that they did in collaboration with Blonde Turkey. As we can see right here, it is a really, really, really pretty rainbow palette. It's got, you know, the columns of each colour story, and I really enjoy the layout of this, and I really enjoy this metallic shade Chi right here. I am planning on doing a 3 looks 1 palette video with this palette pretty soon. I don't know when that's going up though. It does have a pressed glitter in here, which does naturally knock it down a bit lower because I do not like pressed glitters in the slightest. The thing that lets this down for me is the formula. These mattes specifically have a very thin formula. Actually, same with the metallics too. They have a very thin formula, and I do not like when matte shadows specifically have a thin formula. They don't layer well on top of each other. You need to have a very specific base with these. I will try using this with concealer, however, I don't like working for my eyeshadow. I don't really like working for it, so that being said, this is in the bottom, and it makes me really sad. Also, this white. Shit! The next palette in my ranking is the Colourpop Orangey Glad palette. Now, this one also is the only other palette of mine that has a pressed glitter in it, which kind of makes sense. I don't like pressed glitters. No. The formula is pretty okay. Metallics in this palette are not the greatest. They do require a bit of building. And this palette, although it's called Orangey Glad, it's not that orange. It's more peachy and coral than anything. The only true orange in this palette is the shade Sunkissed right here. And then this metallic orange and this metallic orange are the only, like, real oranges in the palette. This is a coral. This is like a burnt brown, essentially. That's a peach, that's a peach, that's a beigey peach, and that's a glitter, so it's irrelevant to me. And also, I just don't wear orange eyeshadow, like, ever. I bought this so I could have it when I did want to wear orange eyeshadow, and whenever I do wear orange shadow, I do reach for this. However, it's just not that often. Next palette in my lowest half of this ranking is this one from Fenty Beauty. This is the Snap Shadows in number 7 Cadet. My mum did purchase this for me for my birthday, and I do really love this mustard shade. I always mention how much I adore this mustard shade so much. The formula is pretty good, the metallics are pretty nice. It's just a bang average formula in my personal opinion, although that mustard, oh, it's amazing. I don't reach for this that often because of the colour story. I can see myself wearing this all the time in autumn. Next up is another palette that was gifted to me from a family member, thank you Holly, and it's the Melt Radioactive palette. This packaging is holographic, I mean look at that. Oh, it's gorgeous. This packaging is so nice, but but this is what it looks like on the inside. Let me actually hold it up properly. Again, this is a palette that I actually really enjoy. However, the only thing that's putting it a bit lower in my ranking is because the formula does require a bit of work. Now, unlike the Lunar Skies formula, these mattes are not as thin as them, but they aren't as thick as I would like them. They all do have a little bit of sheen in them, which does help them to blend. However, I do have to use these in a very specific way. If you pack on too much, they could be patchy, but they're the type of shadows that's better to build. Like, they can build on each other, but you just gotta be a bit careful with them. But I do like this palette. I've created some really beautiful looks with it, although I will say the only shades that I dislike, like actually dislike in this palette, are the two purples. This purple in particular, called Uranium, it's that melt metallic formula that's very thin and just patchy and not great. But other than that, I really do enjoy this palette. I do like reaching in for it for this yellow in particular, and this green, really nice. Now, the last palette in my bottom third of this ranking video is another Colourpop one, and it's the Dream Street palette that they came out with with Kathleen Lights. I cannot speak English. They have since discontinued this palette now, but this palette, you can tell it was very well loved. It was my first Colourpop palette, and this was back when I wore neutrals. The formula is still very pretty, and I still think that this is one of the best palettes that Colourpop has ever come out with. I really like the formula, I love the variety of shades in here, and it still does appeal to me even as a person that doesn't wear neutrals anymore. I can still reach into it for these shades right here, and they're just nice. I do like this palette a lot, but it was just beaten out by other things that are just better in my opinion. Now we're moving on to the next third in my palette ranking, and these palettes were all kind of in the middle ground. Next one is one that's kind of a surprise to me. I'm actually quite surprised at myself that I put this quite low, and it's the Colourpop Lilac You A Lot palette. I really enjoyed this palette when it first came out and when I first used it. However, all of the metallic shades in here, so Cloud, Wake Me, and Trainwreck, those are so bad. They are so bad. They are not that pigmented, they don't blend well on top of each other, they don't build well either, like, I just don't like them, although I do like the shade Fluff. This is the only good metallic in the palette. The mattes in here are very nice, like these three and these two. Very nice mattes, but I just wish the metallics were better, you know? Next up is the Melt Smoke Sessions palette. Now this one, I believe this was my first ever melt palette, and this is quite messy, I do apologize, but I really, really, really love the metallic formula in here. I've mentioned that time and time again. This is the best metallic formula that I've tried from Melt. They are so thick and buttery and metallic and reflective. This shade right here called Black Widow is just beautiful. The reason why it's so far down is because this palette I don't use as a standalone palette. I use this palette in conjunction with other things. Now, normally I do reach into multiple palettes to create my looks. However, this palette you need to reach into multiple palettes. Mainly because there are only two matte shades and they're both very dark. That's why it's low. Next palette is from Juvia's Place, and this one's the Tribe palette, my only Juvia's Place palette currently. I love this palette so much. It's my favorite Juvia's Place palette out of all of them. I love the tones in here. They're very unique to my collection, although I don't like how the packaging is reflective because that's a bit obnoxious, isn't it? The mattes in here are beautiful. The metallics are so good. These ones are quite neon at the top here. I'm sorry that I'm blinding you. They are quite neon, but they work so well. I really like this palette. Again, this is just a preference thing. I don't usually reach for grungy eyeshadow colours that often. Next is the September Rose Brew palette. It looks something like this right here. Now, the reason why I put this one above the Juvia's Place palette is because this one is actually quite unique to my collection too. It does have those like mustardy orange rusty type colours. Like this kind of reminds me a lot of the Melt Rust palette. I don't know if they're similar in the slightest, but just by looking at this palette it does remind me a bit of that. I personally like to have more mattes in a palette than shimmers, but this shimmer formula is so pretty. I mean, you can see in the pan how like wet they look, that I wish that there was more of them because they are beautiful. Again, the colour story isn't one that I normally reach for that often, but the looks that I've created with this are very beautiful, and I know for a fact that in autumn time, I will use this a lot more. This one, it kind of kills me to rank it kind of mid-range. It kind of kills me. But it's the Melt Millennial Pinks palette. Now, I have mentioned that this is one of my favourite palettes, And truly, I really enjoy this palette. I really do. I know a lot of people have had trouble with it, and, you know, I understand why. I will say, the metallics in this palette are not that great. That's why it's kind of lower. I adore the mattes in this palette, like these pinky mattes are so good, this black and grey are so nice. Metallics have something yet to be desired. However, the ones that are actually, like, shit are Rosé Brunch, Mixed Emotions, and Moon Glow. Those shades are just not good. They do not build on top of each other nicely. Even with the glitter primer, they look patchy. The two metallics that are actually nice are Ruby Star and Pink Noise. They're the only good metallics in this palette. My mum did also buy this for me for my birthday this year, and I still love it. I still really do love it. It's the type of palette that I would reach for every day because I love the mattes so much. And yeah, like I said, it really does kill me that this is actually quite low. I would expect this to be in my top 3 or like top 5, but there are just other palettes that beat it out for me. Next up is the Colourpop Blue Moon palette. It looks something like this. It's a very beautiful monochromatic blue palette. I mean, it matches my wig. I mean, come on. The metallics in here are very nice. I really love the shade Lumi and Billie Jean in particular. Not a big fan of Mad About You, but to be fair, I don't like navy. I don't like dark metallics. That's just not my thing. I really don't like them. I never use them. The mattes in here are absolutely stunning, especially Moonlight right here. It's the perfect pastel blue. Oh, I love it. I think I'm close to hitting pan on it. I've spoken about this on my Instagram, but I haven't really talked about it on YouTube, but I kind of don't support Colourpop anymore. Not kind of. I don't support Colourpop anymore, but I still have a lot of their things, so that's why I continue to use them and show them because, you know, they're part of my collection, so I do have to show them off, but just want to let y'all know, I don't support Colourpop, but I will say that this is a fantastic palette. It is a really good palette. Now, this is the only palette that I actually know the number of the ranking. This is number 6, so this one just missed my top 5 spot. It's the Kaleidos Escape Pod palette. I was quite harsh in my review of this palette. I do think it is a really beautiful palette, but I just think the price is a little bit high. Personally, I did get this palette in PR and I'm really grateful for that. The metallics in here are absolutely they're stunning. The metallics in here are absolutely beautiful, and it's kind of a 50-50 split with the mattes and the metallics. The mattes aren't the same Kaleidos formula that I know and love, so that's why I was quite harsh in my review of it, because I was expecting the mattes to be the same Kaleidos formula, and they're not. The mattes are still really nice, apart from this blue. We know how much I dislike this blue. But I've made some really beautiful looks with this palette, and I really do enjoy it. I mean, it's number 6 in my rankings, so I clearly love it. It just missed the top 5 spot. And the color story is very unique. Very unique. I really enjoyed this palette, and the packaging is so cool. Now we are moving on to my top 5. My top 5, oh my gosh, it was so hard to rank my top 5. There was a very clear, like, number 1 and 2, but the other 3, oh, it was so difficult. So in 5th place is my Nabla Soul Blooming palette. Now, this is one of my favourite palettes. One of my favourites. I've hit pan in 2 shades. Like, I love this palette so much. I've got such fond memories with it, and the looks that I create with it are very beautiful. I just feel like a little fairy. Like a little fairy whenever I wear this. I love the mattes especially. Metallics, you know, you need a glitter primer to make them work, but, you know, they still work beautifully. But I really like the vibes of this palette, and I love it. I love it so much. But it is number 5 because there's a palette that is ranked before this, which I think I like a little bit better. And that palette being the Uden's Eye Alva palette. Now, oh my goodness, I love this palette so much. So much. The metallics in this palette are super high shine and reflective and glittery, which I love, and there's more metallics than mattes in this palette, which normally I'm not a big fan of, but I don't mind because these are so stunning. Yes, this is a neutral palette, but this is my type of neutral palette. This is my type of neutral, because the neutrals in here are very, like, pinky mauvey, and also there's that pop of yellow, which I really like. Every single look that I've created with this palette thus far has just, I just feel pretty. I just feel very pretty, and I will say that even though this is ranked just above Nabla, the reason why is because of the metallics. I prefer Uden's Eye their metallic formula more than Nabla's, but they aren't dupes of each other, but they give off a similar vibe, and that's why they are so close. I love both of these. I love them so much. I mean, my top 5, I would recommend them in a heartbeat. I would recommend my top 5 in a heartbeat to anybody. Now, my number 3 spot, this was initially my number 2, but then you'll see what my number 2 palette is. I feel like top 3, these ones are like my all-time favorites, and I just spoiled it for you there. Well done, Sky. But this is the Electro Turquoise palette from Kaleidos. My love affair with this palette when I initially got it was just so strong, so strong. The mattes in here are so buttery, creamy, and pigmented, and easy to blend and easy to work with. The metallics in here, I mean, look at Tron right there. Like, she's beaming. She's beaming. They're so sparkly and wet looking on the eyes. I really want to buy more Kaleidos palettes. Honestly, I think I might buy all of them. Actually, no, that's a bit stupid, Sky. I have my eye on the Astro Pink, and I really hope they come out with more palettes in this format because I would 100% buy them. Now, my number 2 palette, I'm actually wearing this on my eyes today, and it's the Lethal After Dark palette. Now, I do count this as a full palette since you can buy it as such, and it was released as a full palette, but you can pop out these singles and rearrange them and, you know, put other lethal shadows in here, but I count this as more of a standalone palette than a single shadow palette. I'm wearing these 2 shades on my eyes today. The only critique I have of this palette is that the names of the shadows aren't actually on the back of the pans, so that kind of sucks. But I did a 3 looks 1 palette with this palette, and I absolutely adore it. The metallics in here, again, are so wet looking, so glittery, so metallic. They are a different metallic formula than Lethal's regular metallics, and I really hope they continue with this formula because it's so good. Lethal's mattes are some of my favorite mattes that any brand ever makes. If you haven't tried Lethal, you are really missing out. Like, they are such a good brand. They are such a good indie brand. They're one of my favorite indie brands ever. And this color story, I mean, it's 90s inspired. I love the 90s. I wasn't born in the 90s, but us early 2000s babies experienced the exact same things as you 90s babies did. We experienced the same thing. Don't try and say that we didn't. So I love the inspiration. I love the color story. It's so fun and interesting, and this is definitely... I love this palette so much. I love it so much. Now, my number 1 palette, again, this is definitely no surprise to anybody. Literally not a surprise to anybody. Say it with me. Say it with me. The Sugar Pill Fun Size palette. How predictable am I? I have been singing this palette's praises ever since I got it, and I mean, look at it. I love Sugar Pill's formula, and this is actually a different formula than their single shadows, but this is such a good formula. Oh my gosh, so easy to work with. You can make these more pastel, you can make them more bright. They are so good. I love that this is an all matte palette because, you know, it gives you a lot of free range to just play with color. It's so fun, it's so small, and every single shade in here is so good. I will say that these 2 shades, Level Up and Rage Quit, they do look similar in the pan, but they are quite different on the eyes. But if I had to add one thing to this palette, it would probably be to instead have a pink in the middle, I would change this to like a duochrome magical sparkly topper shade, like one of the Devinah Sugar Drops shadows. But other than that, like, this palette is absolutely perfect to me. I will say that these shades right here, this row right here, does require a bit of building on the eyes, and these don't swatch well. Like, these do not swatch well. I love it so much. If you haven't tried this palette already, I really think you should. I don't think it's limited edition. I don't think so. It does sell out very quickly, so you have to, like, be on it. That's enough about me gushing about this palette, and that is it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please let me know what are some of your favorite palettes in your collection, and if we share any similar rankings. If you make videos on YouTube, please do this video. I'm so nosy when it comes to people's collections. Like, I love seeing what people have and how they rank in their collection. It's interesting to hear people's thought processes. Full details of this eye makeup should already be on Instagram, which is Beauty by Sky. Follow me on there if you want to see more colourful looks from me and just overall more makeup content from me. my Instagram is the place to be. You also can follow me on my other social media. I have a personal Instagram account. I live stream on Twitch 3 times a week, although right now I've been kind of shit at that, I'm gonna be quite honest. And my Twitter are all linked down below. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already. I hope you guys are having a great day, and stay safe, wash your hands, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!